What happens when the person who promised to protect your heart becomes the person deciding who you're allowed to love? Because that is the terrifying new question hanging over Katie Spencer and Brooke Logan. Two sisters who have survived scandals, betrayals, heartbreak, and the kind of family chaos most people would never recover from, are suddenly facing something even colder than another argument. They may be facing exile from each other. Not because they stopped being sisters, not because the pain vanished, but because Bill Spencer and Ridge Forrester appear ready to turn a family wound into a full-scale war. And the most unsettling part is this. Katie and Brooke may still believe there's time to soften, apologize, explain, maybe even forgive. But their husbands may already be past forgiveness. They may be preparing ultimatums that don't sound like love at all. They sound like ownership. You're watching Buzz Delight. I'm Adam, and if you can already feel how explosive this is getting, hit like, share this with someone who lives for B&B drama, and subscribe, because this story is not just about two sisters fighting. It's about what happens when powerful men weaponize pain, when loyalty becomes a prison, and when a family feud grows so large that even love starts looking like betrayal. At first glance, Katie and Brooke's latest conflict looks like familiar Logan territory, a painful office shakeup, hurt pride, old insecurities, a sister feeling replaced, another sister trying to hold her position inside the Forrester world. But underneath that polished fashion house drama is something much more dangerous. This is not really about one job. It is about identity. It is about who gets seen, who gets chosen, and who gets quietly pushed aside while everyone pretends it's just business. Katie Spencer's heartbreak did not begin the moment Brooke stepped into her place. It began in the silence that followed. That silence told Katie something brutal. It told her that the Forresters could move her out of the frame and keep going. It told her that her value could be discussed, adjusted, and replaced in rooms where she was supposed to matter. And when the woman stepping into that space was her own sister, the humiliation cut deeper than any corporate decision ever could. Because betrayal from a stranger bruises the ego. Betrayal from family rearranges your sense of reality. Brooke Logan, meanwhile, is not simply a villain in Katie's story. That would be too easy, and the bold and the beautiful rarely lets pain stay that simple. Brooke has spent much of her life fighting to remain central in a world that constantly judges her, desires her, resents her, and uses her. To Brooke, taking up space at Forrester may not feel like stealing from Katie. It may feel like survival, like proof that she still belongs, like proof that no matter how messy life becomes, she can still stand inside that glamorous empire and matter. But that is exactly why the wound is so hard to close. Katie sees erasure. Brooke sees validation. Katie feels discarded. Brooke feels threatened. And between those two emotional truths sits a family legacy so tangled that any apology would have to carry years of history on its back. Then Bill Spencer enters the story, and everything changes. Bill does not respond to Katie's pain with a simple embrace and a quiet reassurance. That is not how Dollar Bill moves through the world. Bill sees pain as a signal. He sees humiliation as opportunity. If Katie has been cast aside by Forrester, then Bill can build her something bigger, louder, more defiant. On the surface, giving Katie her own fashion company feels romantic, almost heroic. It tells her she is not forgotten. It tells her she deserves power. It tells her he will not stand by while anyone makes his wife feel small. But Bill Spencer's grand gestures rarely come without consequences. Because when Bill gives Katie a company, he does more than heal a wound. He creates a battlefield. He takes a private sisterly fracture and wraps it in money, competition, pride, and revenge. Suddenly, Katie's pain is no longer just Katie's. It belongs to the Spencer name. It belongs to Bill's ego. It becomes a weapon aimed directly at the Forresters. And that is where Ridge Forrester comes in. Ridge does not simply see a rival company. He sees an attack on his family's legacy. He sees Bill Spencer doing what Bill Spencer has always done best, storming into someone else's pain and turning it into leverage. To Ridge, this is not a husband supporting his wife. This is Dollar Bill using Katie as the emotional centerpiece of a business war. And once Ridge sees it that way, Brooke is no longer just Brooke. She becomes a potential security risk inside her own marriage. That is the cruel genius of this conflict. Katie and Brooke may have started the emotional fire, but Bill and Ridge are the ones building walls around it. And once men like Bill and Ridge start building walls, they rarely leave doors. Brooke may eventually soften. She may look at the wreckage and realize that losing Katie, losing peace with hope, losing access to the people who make her feel human is too high a price to pay for pride. Brooke has made mistakes, yes, but she is also someone who knows the ache of family separation. She knows what it means to love people who are furious with her. She knows that silence can become permanent if nobody is brave enough to break it. So the natural instinct would be for Brooke to reach out, to make a call, to show up, to try to turn down the temperature before the damage becomes generational. But Ridge may not see that as healing. He may see it as betrayal. That is where this story becomes psychologically fascinating. Ridge's love for Brooke has always been intense, but intensity can easily disguise control when fear enters the room. If Ridge believes the Spencers are now enemies, then Brooke's connection to Katie, Hope, or anyone tied to that rival camp becomes more than family. It becomes a threat to Forrester's strategy. It becomes disloyalty dressed up as sisterhood. And if Ridge tells Brooke to stay away, he will likely frame it as protection. Protection of their marriage, protection of the company, protection of the family. But beneath that polished Forrester language is a much sharper message. Choose us or choose them. That is not a request. That is a cage. Across town, Katie may be facing the same trap from a very different man. Bill Spencer knows how to speak to Katie's deepest injuries. He knows where the scars are. He knows she has felt overshadowed, underestimated, and betrayed before. And if he warns her to steer clear of her sisters, he may not sound cruel. He may sound devoted. He may remind her that they turned away when she needed them. He may remind her that he was the one who stood beside her. He may say he is the only person who truly saw her pain and acted on it. That kind of manipulation is dangerous because it arrives wearing the face of loyalty. Bill does not have to shout to isolate Katie. He only has to make reconciliation feel like self-betrayal. He only has to convince her that forgiveness would mean crawling back to the people who wounded her. And the more Katie believes Bill's version of events, the less she notices that the company meant to liberate her may also be binding her tighter to his agenda. That is the emotional trap at the center of this entire storyline. Katie and Brooke think they are fighting each other, but the real power struggle may be happening around them. Their husbands are not simply reacting to the feud. They are shaping it, feeding it, rebranding it as loyalty. And if neither sister is careful, they could wake up inside a war they no longer control. The tragedy is that Katie and Brooke's bond was never supposed to be this fragile. Logan's sisterhood has always been messy, passionate, infuriating, and strangely unbreakable. These women can wound each other in ways outsiders never could because they know each other's history. They know the childhood fears, the romantic disasters, the humiliations, the hopes. They know where to hit, but they also know how to hold. That is why this feud feels different. It is no longer just about anger. It is about access. Who gets access to Brooke? Who gets access to Katie? Who gets to define what forgiveness would mean? Once a husband starts deciding whether a wife can speak to her sister, the argument is no longer about the original injury. It is about control, and control is the one language Bill and Ridge both understand. They may despise each other, but in this moment, they are more alike than either would ever admit. Ridge wraps his dominance in legacy, taste, and family honor. Bill wraps his in loyalty, money, and brute force devotion. Ridge wants Brooke aligned with Forrester. Bill wants Katie protected under Spencer armor. One man speaks like a designer defending a dynasty. The other speaks like a king defending territory. But the emotional demand underneath is almost identical. Do not cross the line I drew for you. That is why the question of who issues the Logan ultimatum first may almost be less important than the fact that both men are capable of it. Ridge could forbid Brooke from reaching across enemy lines because he believes the future of Forrester is at stake. Bill could warn Katie away from Brooke because he believes betrayal deserves punishment. Both men could convince themselves they are doing the right thing. Both could call it love. But love that requires isolation is never just love. And while Katie and Brooke are trapped inside this emotional chess match, another danger is quietly moving through the Spencer world. Will Spencer is being pulled into his own storm, one that looks very different from his parents' polished war but maybe just as dangerous. He is being encouraged to move on from Elektra, to let go, to accept that heartbreak does not have to be the end of his story. On the surface, that sounds healthy. Wyatt may believe he is helping his brother step back into life, reminding him that one disappointment should not define him. But then there is Melissa Dillon, or Nancy, depending on which version of herself she wants people to see. Dillon's presence carries the uneasy energy of someone who is not simply looking for romance. There is an edge there, a hunger. She appears to enjoy the damage around Elektra a little too much, and that detail matters. Because people reveal themselves in the moments they think no one is measuring. A person who takes pleasure in someone else's hurt is not just insecure, they are dangerous. And now her attention appears to be shifting toward the Spencer family. That should make everyone nervous. The Spencers are already vulnerable. Bill is focused on Ridge. Katie is caught between loyalty, hurt, and suspicion. Will is emotionally exposed. Wyatt is trying to nudge life forward without necessarily seeing the full picture. That is exactly the kind of environment where someone like Dillon can thrive. She does not need to break down the front door if the family leaves one cracked open in the name of moving on. Then comes the unexpected sleepover, the kind of detail that would feel romantic in another story but feels like a warning sign here. Wyatt finds out, and suddenly, the casual encouragement to move forward begins to look more complicated. Because what if moving on too quickly is not healing? What if it is an invitation for the wrong person to step into a heart that has not recovered enough to protect itself? Katie's first meeting with Dillon is tense, and that tension is important. Katie may be wounded right now, but she is not foolish. In fact, pain has sharpened her instincts. A woman who has been underestimated learns to read a room differently. She watches what people avoid saying. She notices when charm feels rehearsed. She understands that a sweet smile can hide a strategy. And by the time Katie begins questioning Dillon's past, the Spencer family may have a second war forming inside its own walls. That is the brilliant irony of this chapter. Bill may be so determined to protect Katie from Brooke that he misses the stranger circling his family. He may be so obsessed with the Forrester threat that he fails to see the threat that does not carry the Forrester name at all. And Katie, the woman he may try to restrict, could be the one person alert enough to recognize danger before it fully reveals itself. That is what control often does. It blinds the controller. Bill may believe Katie needs boundaries, but Katie may need freedom to trust her own instincts. Ridge may believe Brooke needs discipline, but Brooke may need room to repair what pride has damaged. The men at the center of this feud are so focused on commanding the battlefield that they may not notice the emotional landmines forming beneath their own feet. And while Los Angeles turns sisterhood into a war zone, another story is quietly unfolding with a very different kind of heartbreak. Carter Walton and Daphne Rose are facing a loss that is not loud, not explosive, not built from betrayal, but devastating in its intimacy. Daphne's early menopause diagnosis does not arrive like a villain storming through the door. It arrives like a future suddenly going silent. A dream that once felt assumed now becomes something to grieve. A life imagined in private moments becomes uncertain. For Daphne, this is more than medical news. It reaches into identity, womanhood, partnership, and the fragile hope of what a family might look like. Daphne is someone associated with instinct, beauty, and sensory power, a woman who often seems able to detect what others miss. But this is the kind of pain no gift can perfume, no elegance can soften, no confidence can outrun. Carter's role in this story matters because it offers a contrast to the possessive love surrounding Katie and Brooke. Carter is hurting too. He is mourning the life he thought he and Daphne might build, but he does not appear to be using that grief to dominate her. He is trying to stand beside her while also privately absorbing his own loss. That is not easy. Real support is not the absence of pain. It is the refusal to turn your pain into another person's burden. And when Carter receives support from Steffi, it reminds us that not every emotional connection in this world has to become a weapon. Sometimes people can simply witness each other's pain. Sometimes support can exist without an agenda. In the middle of all this manipulation, that kind of emotional honesty feels almost radical. But peace never lasts long on this canvas. Because while Carter and Daphne are processing a painful truth, Steffi Forrester Finnegan is stepping into danger across the ocean. And the danger has a name that still makes every room feel colder. Sheila. The moment Sheila learns where Steffi will be, the entire Tempian truly moves toward Taylor. Sheila's illusion of belonging could shatter completely. Every relationship is sitting on a pressure point, and that is why the Logan sisters' feud cannot be dismissed as ordinary soap opera drama. It has become the emotional engine driving several collisions at once. Brooke and Katie's inability to reconcile gives Bill and Ridge permission to escalate. Bill and Ridge's escalation makes reconciliation harder. That tension distracts the Spencer family from Dylan. Sheila'S movement towards Steffi threatens to pull the Forresters into another traumatic spiral. Carter and Daphne's quiet heartbreak reminds everyone what love should look like when it is not being used as a weapon. The contrast is devastating. Carter is trying to support Daphne without owning her grief. Bill may try to support Katie by owning her anger. Ridge may try to support Brooke by limiting her choices. Sheila may try to reclaim love by terrorizing the people who deny her access. And Dylan may be trying to turn someone else's vulnerability into her opportunity. That is not coincidence. That is a map of the entire story. The strongest emotional question now is not whether Katie and Brooke can apologize. It is whether they will be allowed to. Because sometimes the first step toward healing is not saying, "I'm sorry." Sometimes it is recognizing who benefits from keeping you angry. Bill benefits if Katie stays wounded enough to need him as her defender. Ridge benefits if Brooke stays aligned against the Spencers. Dylan benefits if the Spencer family remains distracted. Sheila benefits if chaos keeps everyone reacting instead of preparing. And the longer everyone fights the wrong battle, the more dangerous the real battle becomes. Imagine Brooke standing at the edge of a phone call she is not supposed to make. Imagine Katie seeing her sister's name and feeling both rage and longing. Imagine Ridge watching Brooke's hesitation and reading it as betrayal before a single word is spoken. Imagine Bill sensing Katie soften and immediately reminding her of the humiliation that started it all. That is how families break. Not always with one explosion, sometimes with 1,000 interruptions of tenderness. And yet, tenderness is exactly what this story may need most. Katie and Brooke do not have to pretend nothing happened. Katie does not have to swallow her hurt just to keep the Logan peace. Brooke does not have to become the sole villain in a conflict built by many hands. But if they let Bill and Ridge define the terms of their sisterhood, they may lose something neither man can rebuild. Because companies can be launched. Fashion lines can be revived. Marriages can survive storms. But once sisters become strangers by command, the damage becomes much harder to undo. That is the nightmare hiding underneath the glamour. The old Spencer-Forrester rivalry has returned with sharper teeth. But this time, the real casualties may not be Bill and Ridge. Men like them can survive war because war gives them purpose. The real casualties may be the women they claim to be defending. Katie could lose her sister in the name of loyalty. Brooke could lose her daughter's trust and her family access in the name of Forrester unity. Steffi could lose safety because Finn underestimated Sheila'S ability to weaponize information. Daphne could lose the future she imagined, even as Carter tries to hold the present together. Everywhere, women are being forced to carry the emotional cost of other people's choices. That is why Katie's next move matters so much. If she accepts Bill's warning without question, she may gain a protector but lose part of herself. If she challenges him, the marriage may face a test Bill did not expect. Katie has always had more steel in her than people remember. She can be gentle, but she is not weak. She can be wounded, but she is not blind. And if Bill pushes too hard, he may discover that the woman he tried to defend does not appreciate being managed like a business asset. Brooke's next move may be equally explosive. If Ridge tries to dictate her family relationships, Brooke could obey out of fear of losing him, or she could rebel because the demand crosses a line even she cannot ignore. Brooke has made many choices for love, sometimes wise, sometimes disastrous. But being told to cut off her own blood may awaken a different kind of defiance. Not the impulsive kind, the survival kind. And then there is hope. Brooke wanting to make amends with hope adds another emotional layer, because a mother-daughter fracture is not the same as a sisterly feud. Hope represents Brooke's conscience in many ways, the part of her life where regret cannot be hidden behind glamour. If Brooke is prevented from reaching hope because of the wider battle, the consequences could become deeply personal. Ridge may think he is protecting a company, but Brooke may feel he is standing between her and her child. That is a dangerous line for any husband to cross. The deeper this conflict goes, the more it exposes how fragile these alliances really are. Ridge and Brooke may present a united front, but unity built on restriction can crack quickly. Bill and Katie may appear strong, but strength built on resentment can turn toxic fast. The moment one woman asks, "Why are you so afraid of me talking to my own family?" the entire structure begins to shake. Because that is the question neither Bill nor Ridge can answer honestly. If Bill is certain Katie has been wronged and would freely choose him, why does he need to warn her away from her sisters? If Ridge believes Brooke truly understands the danger of the Spencer rivalry, why would he need to forbid contact? Ultimatums reveal insecurity. They are not proof of strength. They are proof that someone fears what might happen if love is allowed to move freely. And maybe that is the real secret of this storyline. The men are not afraid Katie and Brooke will keep fighting. They are afraid they will stop. If the sisters reconcile, Bill loses the emotional justification for his war. Ridge loses the clarity of his enemy line. The feud becomes messy again, human again, harder to exploit. Forgiveness would collapse the battlefield. And for men who thrive when the world is divided into sides, forgiveness is chaos. Meanwhile, Dylan's presence serves as a warning about what happens when families become too consumed with internal war. While everyone is busy choosing sides, someone new can enter with hidden motives. Katie's suspicion may become one of the most important instincts in the Spencer house. If Dylan's greed escalates, if her interest in Will becomes less about attraction and more about access, Katie may have to protect her family from a danger Bill did not authorize her to notice. That could create one of the most fascinating tensions ahead. Bill may want Katie focused on Brooke as the threat. Katie may insist the threat is much closer. And if Bill dismisses her because he is too invested in his feud with Ridge, he could repeat the very sin that started this whole mess, underestimating Katie. Nothing would cut deeper than that. Over in Steffi and Finn's orbit, the Monaco danger carries the same lesson in a more urgent form. Finn's carelessness gives Sheila information, and information in Sheila's hands becomes a weapon. It is not enough to love Steffi. Finn has to protect the boundaries that keep her safe. Love without vigilance can become exposure. And when Sheila is involved, exposure can become disaster. Steffi has survived enough to know that danger does not always announce itself. She has learned to live with the shadow of Sheila's obsession, but a planned reunion, a church, a romantic destination, all of it creates the illusion of safety. That illusion may be exactly what Sheila needs. If Finn is delayed, if Steffi is waiting, if Sheila arrives first, the entire emotional promise of that reunion could flip into terror. And Sheila's emotional state may be more unstable than ever if Deacon's connection to Taylor deepens. Sheila does not simply lose men. She converts rejection into grievance. She tells herself a story where she is the victim, where everyone else is cruel, where revenge becomes self-defense. That is the psychology that makes her so combustible. She cannot sit with abandonment. She has to make someone pay for it. So while Bill and Ridge are drawing lines around their wives, Sheila may be crossing every line imaginable. That is the difference between control and chaos. Bill and Ridge want order on their terms. Sheila wants emotional revenge when order excludes her. Dylan may want money, status, or access. Carter wants to preserve love through grief. Every storyline is asking what people do when the future they expected is threatened. Some people support, some people manipulate, some people hunt. That is why this upcoming chapter feels bigger than a simple family feud. It feels like a moral stress test for everyone involved. Bill must decide whether loving Katie means empowering her or directing her. Ridge must decide whether trusting Brooke means allowing her to make painful choices without surveillance. Katie must decide whether her hurt is hers to process or Bill's to weaponize. Brooke must decide whether family reconciliation is worth risking Ridge's anger. Finn must face the cost of carelessness. Steffi must navigate danger that keeps following her no matter how far she travels. Carter and Daphne must learn whether love can survive a future rewritten by grief. And Deacon may have to confront the consequences of moving on, while Sheila still believes she has a claim on his life. No one is standing on neutral ground anymore. The most heartbreaking possibility is that Katie and Brooke may both want the same thing before this is over. Not victory, not dominance, not revenge, just relief. Relief from the anger. Relief from being used as symbols in a war between men. Relief from waking up every day and having their pain converted into strategy. But relief will not come easily because too many people have invested in the conflict. Bill has invested pride. Ridge has invested legacy. The companies have invested competition. The families have invested ego. Even the audience can feel the machine turning. Every attempt at peace threatens someone's power. Every private emotion now has public consequences. And that is what makes the coming ultimatum so chilling. It may not arrive as a dramatic scream. It may come quietly, in a living room, with a calm voice and a firm stare. It may sound reasonable. It may sound like concern. It may even sound like love. But the message will be unmistakable. Do not go to her. Do not call them. Do not make peace with the people I have chosen as enemies. And once that message is spoken, Katie and Brooke's marriages change. Because the question will no longer be whether they agree with their husbands. The question will be whether they still own their own hearts. That is where the true suspense lives. Not in whether Bill and Ridge hate each other. We know they do. Not in whether Katie and Brooke are hurt. We know they are. The real suspense is whether either sister will recognize the moment love turns into control before it is too late. Katie may be the first to see it, because Katie's entire story right now is about being underestimated. The Forresters underestimated her value. Brooke underestimated the depth of her wound. Bill may underestimate her independence. Dylan may underestimate her instincts. That is a dangerous mistake to make with Katie Spencer. A woman who has been pushed aside long enough eventually stops asking for space and starts taking it. Brooke, too, may surprise everyone. People often reduce Brooke to emotion, romance, and impulse, but Brooke has survived because she adapts. She may stumble, she may rationalize, she may reach for the wrong comfort, but she also knows when a relationship begins to suffocate. If Ridge expects silent obedience, he may awaken the very part of Brooke he can never fully control. And if both sisters begin to question their husbands at the same time, the entire war could turn inside out. Imagine Bill preparing to destroy Ridge, only to discover Katie is no longer willing to be the reason. Imagine Ridge tightening his grip on Brooke, only to realize she is not a Forrester soldier, but a Logan woman with her own unfinished business. Imagine Katie and Brooke meeting despite the warnings, not because everything is forgiven, but because no man gets to decide whether blood still matters. That meeting, if it happens, could become more dangerous than any corporate attack. Because once Katie and Brooke speak honestly, the story Bill and Ridge have been telling begins to fall apart. Katie may admit that Brooke hurt her deeply, but Bill's war has not healed her. Brooke may admit that she failed Katie, but Ridge's restrictions have not protected her. They may not leave that conversation reconciled, but they could leave it awake. And awake women are dangerous in a world built on controlling their choices. At the same time, Katie's suspicion of Dylan may force the Spencer family to confront a threat that does not fit Bill's preferred narrative. If Dylan's past begins to unravel, if her greed becomes undeniable, if Will's vulnerability has been exploited, Katie could prove she was right to look beyond the family feud. And Bill may have to face the uncomfortable truth that while he was busy warning Katie about her sisters, she was the one paying attention to the stranger near their son. That kind of reversal could shake him. For Ridge, the pressure from Steffi's world could complicate everything. If danger explodes around Steffi and Finn, Ridge's instinct to protect his family will only intensify. Sheila'S move toward Monaco could make him even more controlling, more convinced that the world is full of threats and that strict boundaries are the only answer. But fear is a terrible architect. It builds fortresses that often trap the people inside. Steffi's danger could become the emotional excuse Ridge uses to tighten control over everyone. And Brooke may have to decide whether she can live in a marriage where every crisis becomes another reason for her freedom to shrink. Meanwhile, Carter and Daphne's story quietly asks the question everyone else is avoiding. What does love look like when it cannot fix the pain? Carter cannot undo Daphne's diagnosis. He cannot restore the future they imagined by force of will. He cannot buy a solution, command a solution, or threaten the universe into giving them what they wanted. All he can do is stay, grieve honestly, and love without turning that grief into control. That may be the healthiest love on the canvas right now. And that contrast makes Bill and Ridge look even more exposed. Because if Carter can stand in pain without dominating Daphne, why can't Bill stand in Katie's pain without turning it into a war? If Carter can mourn without making Daphne responsible for his anger, why can't Ridge fear the Spencers without making Brooke prove her loyalty through isolation? The answer is uncomfortable, because Bill and Ridge are not just protecting their wives, they are protecting their own identities. Bill needs to be the man who rescues, retaliates, and wins. Ridge needs to be the man who guards the Forrester name and decides where the boundaries belong. Katie and Brooke's reconciliation would challenge both identities. It would tell Bill that Katie's healing does not belong to him. It would tell Ridge that Brooke's loyalty cannot be reduced to obedience. That is why the ultimatum is not a side detail. It is the emotional centerpiece. An ultimatum always pretends to simplify. Choose this or that, us or them, loyalty or betrayal. But real family is rarely that clean. Katie can be hurt by Brooke and still love her. Brooke can owe Katie accountability and still deserve the chance to reach out. Hope can be angry and still need her mother. A wife can support her husband without surrendering her entire family history at the door. Bill and Ridge may want clean lines because clean lines make war easier. But the Logan women have never lived clean lives. They live in complicated love, complicated mistakes, complicated forgiveness. That is exactly what makes them powerful and exactly what makes them impossible to fully control. As everything accelerates, the emotional stakes become painfully clear. If Katie obeys Bill, she may preserve peace in her marriage, but lose the chance to heal with Brooke on her own terms. If Brooke obeys Ridge, she may protect her place in the Forrester camp, but deepen the fracture with Katie and Hope. If either woman refuses, her marriage could become the next battlefield. And if both refuse, then Bill and Ridge may finally have to fight a war without using their wives as shields. That possibility is electric, because the real showdown may not be Bill versus Ridge. It may be Katie versus the version of love that tells her to stay angry. It may be Brooke versus the version of loyalty that tells her to stay silent. It may be both sisters realizing that the men demanding allegiance are also terrified of what happens when the Logan bond stops being available for manipulation. That is the emotional bomb waiting to go off. And while that bomb ticks in Los Angeles, Sheila'S shadow stretches toward Steffi, Dylan's motives grow darker around Will, Carter, and Daphne face grief with quiet bravery, and Deacon's next move with Taylor threatens to ignite Sheila'S most dangerous instincts. Every story is moving toward a collision where love, control, suspicion, and revenge all meet in the same narrow hallway. The question now is not whether someone will cross a line. The question is who crosses it first. Will it be Ridge, telling Brooke that family contact now comes with consequences? Will it be Bill, warning Katie that forgiveness would be a betrayal of everything he has done for her? Will it be Dylan, stepping too far into Spencer territory and exposing the greed Katie already senses? Will it be Sheila, turning a romantic reunion into a nightmare because Finn allowed one detail to slip? Or will it be Katie and Brooke themselves, finally crossing the one line their husbands may fear most? The line back to each other? Because if the Logan sisters decide that no man gets to outlaw their bond, this war could change overnight. And the most dangerous moment may not be the ultimatum itself. It may be the silence right after it, when Katie and Brooke realize that the choice in front of them was never really sister versus husband, Spencer versus Forrester, loyalty versus betrayal. It was freedom versus control. And once that truth lands, the entire empire begins to tremble.